Hi, this is Daniel Batten from the Northern New England Conference, the Seventh-day Adventist, giving an illustration how to get started in Jewel. Once you have run your installation CD, this is the last step that comes up. It will launch Jewel automatically, and it's looking for a database to open. We are going to create our own database. We go to File, then we go to Utilities, then to create new database. In many cases, on your first install, this screen right here, Enter Church Name, will come up automatically. So I'm going to enter my own local church that I am the treasurer of. I'm going to create a sample version for this demonstration. So then I click OK. The first step that it's going to bring me to is suggesting that I add accounts. However, I'm going to first show you the main menu. This program is always looking throughout all the months at the next step. Add accounts. You can write checks, transfer funds, reconcile to the bank statement, or do reports and graphs at any time in the month. You also have a standard Windows options up in the gray bar at the top. Under File, you have things related to files, related to backups, restoring, and this type of thing. Offerings, you can reverse the insufficient funds check if somebody gives a bad check. You can do a number of other things manually if you need to. Accounting, you can make general journal entries. You can get to everything through this that you see at the bottom and more. Maintenance, this would be for adjusting the basic things as far as properties in the database. You can edit names and accounts and properties. And Jewel also has a rather all-encompassing health menu where you can look at most any topic you'd like. Getting Started gives you lots of different options here. To most any item you want to know about, you can take a look at the list yourself. So the first step is to go to Add Accounts. So first of all, it helps to understand the account numbering system. There are 3 different types of accounts that you can have. You can have bank accounts. You can have, I don't want to change any account types. I am simply illustrating that you have these options. Bank account, which is typically items 1 to 10. And then you have conference funds, which is typically accounts 80 through 82.77. These are funds that you're going to be sending to the conference each month. And then the local funds accounts, which is your local church expenses, which run from accounts 102 to accounts 999. So I'm going to demonstrate by deleting a couple of accounts and then adding a couple of accounts as well. But one other thing to understand is sub-accounts. You will notice under function 708 that you have these accounts indented. The reason these are indented is because they are sub-accounts of church expense, which allows the church to look in more detail at how much did we spend on utilities or these other things. You can add or delete accounts as need be. Let's say that we already own our church, so we don't have a mortgage payment. We can edit this account. Actually, we don't need to edit this account. We can just delete this account. So I'm going to say yes, I want to delete it. We also aren't renting our church out at the moment, so I can delete this account. But I just want to show you something before I delete it. Notice that it's set up as a sub-account of church expense. We can delete this account. But now let's say we see, oh, we want to add a separate sub-account for heating oil. So we go to Add New Account. Let's call this 708.55, since that's a number that's available. 708.55. Then we can call this heating oil expense. And then we're going to make this a sub-account of church expense. Now we have one more account that we want to add. Let's say the church has a local food ministry, and that's not one of the default accounts that's already been provided. So we're going to create account 592. And we're going to call this Community Food Ministry. And this is going to be its own separate account rather than a sub-account. If I'm done adding accounts and editing them, I can click OK. Or if I had more to add, I would click on Add New Account. You can also access this step any time that you choose. The next step that Jewel brings you to is enter beginning balances. So I'm going to make this mathematically very easy. Let's imagine that the church only has a checking account. There's two ways I can pull the checking account up. I can start typing CH and it'll come up. Or if I have the account by memory, which I know it's account number 1, it will also come up. And we're going to put a balance of $10,000 in there. If I had more accounts, let's say I had a savings account, which is an account that's provided by default. Let's say the savings account is $1,000. I can do that. Notice that we have beginning balances, bank accounts $11,000, local fund 0. These two numbers must equal out in order for the beginning balances to equalize. So we click on local funds balances to create the local fund balances. These should be your ending balances from whatever previous method you were doing your accounting. So let's say Sabbath School has a balance of $2,000. Pathfinders has a balance of $1,000. Church School has a balance of $1,000. Notice I just hit enter and I come to the next line in here. 588 is community services that has $1,000, and then church expense has $6,000. Now notice that the bank accounts and the local funds now balance out. So I click OK. You are about to enter beginning balance of $11,000. Is this correct? So I click yes. Do I want to print a copy? You can, but you can always get at this information anytime you want, so I'm going to say no in this instance. The next area is going to ask you to edit names. Now, for those of you that were previously using Church Accountant, good news, you can import the names from Church Accountant and get pretty much all your donor names intact in here. However, throughout time you're going to have to add new names anyway. So notice that we could edit Adventist Book Center, we could edit Northern New England Conference. You'll notice that in Adventist Book Center, they're set up not as a donor, but as a vendor, because there's somebody we're going to be writing checks to, but probably not receiving money from. Note that the Northern New England Conference is set up also as a vendor, somebody we're going to be writing checks to. But every now and then, the conference may have some money for your local evangelism or a refund on insurance or something like that. So we're going to set the conference up as someone that can donate money as well. Next, to add new names, we're going to click on Add New Name. And don't worry about the ID number under names. It's much more important to have a sensible ID number under editing accounts than it is under editing names. I'm going to put my own name in here. I enter first name. Then I come down to last name, put my last name, and I put my address, 31 Drive. You don't have to put the address, but it's useful for when you print out year-end receipts if you want to use a window envelope. Now I'm going to add one more name. This one will be John Smith, address 92 Allen Avenue, Portland, Maine 04101. And I will click. Actually, I'm not going to click OK because I want to add another new name. I know I've got to check. I've got to write to Central Maine Power. When it's a company name, leave the first name blank. Simply put the full name of the company in the last name slot, Central Maine Power, and P.O. Box 457, Augusta, Maine. I don't know. I'm just putting something in there to make sense. Then we'll add also Fairpoint Communications. If I could get my capital letters right. Then we're going to click on address, P.O. Box 34, Augusta, Maine, and put that in. Let's say I'm done entering vendors for now. As I've mentioned, you can edit names, you can edit accounts pretty much at any time that is necessary. Actually, I'm not done, and I'll tell you why I'm not done editing names, because I messed up. You may mess up too, but just as to show you, you can get back. When I did Central Maine Power, there was a very important point I forgot to tell you. See, the default is for it to be set up as donor, but we actually want to set them up as a vendor. And then the same could be said for Fairpoint Communication. We're going to edit them, and we're going to change them to vendor. And I don't believe they're going to be donating at all. So we click OK and say, yes, we are finished setting names. The next step that it automatically brings me to is to set up properties. So one of the first things it does, it's asked for an entity ID. Simply select from a list, and your church's name should show up on the list. So I go down through here. Here's White Memorial Church. I click OK. I type in the church address here. And I put myself in as the treasurer. Next, you'll see we have about 6 different tabs here. Church information, which is pretty straightforward. Next tab is general. Under general, some of the things that we want to take a look at is options here, such as are we printing the checks using the Jewel program, or are we writing out manually the small personal checks? If you are using the checks, then you want the default to be to print every check. But I want that default off, but you can still choose to print an individual check should you need to. The deposit slip program is a program that you can use for counting up the money before you're depositing it. Some of you may already have that done before you get to the step of using this program, in which case you will not have that box checked. Pretty much most of these other options can be left the same. Using pre-printed checks, that would be if you're using a pre-printed style check versus having the program print everything, including the bank's MICR line. Also, fiscal year and closing dates. Well, our church actually uses the fiscal year actually begins in July, because we try to follow on the same year basis as Pine Tree Academy, who we support financially. For many of churches, though, it's likely that the fiscal year will begin in January. At year-end closing, zero out all sub-accounts, budget sub-accounts only, or no sub-accounts. There's no right or wrong answer for this. It depends on what your church's needs are. Most of you will probably want it to zero out. Next, we have internet, and this program will actually send a month-end backup and report to the conference server if you have these enabled. If you are not connected to the internet, then you should uncheck these boxes. Especially if you're not connected to the internet, be sure these boxes are unchecked. Otherwise, leave them checked. That's a useful and helpful way to also have a backup. Next, we're going to look at accounts. The banking information is listed right here. In general, your deposits are going to be going to the checking account. Also, your payments are going to be, the checks you write will also come out of the checking account. You'll be remitting to the Northern New England Conference. And then these are accounts down here that when you're entering your tithe envelopes, these accounts will automatically come up if you just click enter and do nothing. This can help speed up the process of entering. The most commonly used accounts that we find is tithe, church budget. Those are definitely the top two. The next one is probably conference budget offering, and another commonly seen one is world budget offering. And I usually leave it at that for these. Next, you have a reports tab. There's really no need to make any changes. The program will print the needed monthly reports that you need. And then you go to reports formats, where there's also no changes unless possibly you're printing checks, and then in which case you might need to edit the margins to make it print exactly where you want to go in a window envelope. For this example, we don't need to worry about that. Once we're done setting properties, we can click OK, and that completes the step of setup. And now we're ready to get into the monthly entry of starting new offerings and doing all the other normal steps.